welcome. So thanks for being here. This is story time. And I'm not entirely ready to talk about the content that I want to talk about today, which is kind of an irony in of itself. Essentially, what I want to talk about is, again, this extension or this continuing dialogue around the nature of love. And I think that for many of us, we take for granted the expressions, the feelings, the emotions of love themselves. And yet, what I have learned is that life throws us curveballs. And even when our attachment, our desire, our expectation is for that of love, it doesn't always show up when we want it to. So I want to share just a couple of examples of stories of my life when love wasn't there to be expressed, to be returned, and love wasn't there to be received. And what is that like when there is a misalignment in our expectations and our desires with what is real, and the flip, what is present and real and now, and yet doesn't land in a way that is our own alignment? The reason why I struggle with the sharing is because these are not pretty moments of mine in my story. They're not moments that make me feel like a wise and practiced yogi or even a kind and compassionate human. They're evidence of my humanity. And I believe they are also evidence of how our introspection practice, our meditation, is critical to redefine and understand, not necessarily from a comprehension, but from an expression of compassion. Can I understand that that was the best I could do in the moment? So the first story, not in chronological order, but a little easier for me to express because I've shared this story and I have redeemed myself in the sense that this is the story of when I learned that I was expecting my first child. And as much as I wanted to have children, was looking forward to the season of my life when I would be an active parent, to be a mother, and to be in partnership with the parent, right, the father. And I was fortunate enough that this partner was in my life and we had conceived this child. And yet I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready in the sense that we'd been together very long, my husband now and I wasn't ready in the sense of feeling established in my career, in my profession, in my home. In fact, I was living temporarily under the shared roof of my brother and his wife, and my partner was 300 miles away. We were visiting on weekends in order to sustain our courtship, our relationship. And it was under this stressful time frame of transition. I had left a career, I was starting anew, I had relocated, I moved. We were living apart from each other after having literally just few weeks in the same town, my now husband, Peter, and I. And yet all of that tumultuous energy was just stirred up by the fact that the timing of learning that I was pregnant, that I was expecting, made life a little more challenging for me. Not only because I was going for my well woman checkup, I wasn't going because I was anticipating pregnancy. We learned that we were pregnant as a consequence of just coming in for my regular well visit. So when the doctor told me that I was pregnant, that I was expecting, I cried. I remember being full of shame because I was at the doctor's by myself. Peter was at home in New York. We were not yet married. We were engaged to be married, but we were not yet married. And all of a sudden, I felt like I'd failed. See, I had been incredibly committed to waiting for a sexual activity until I was married. That's not normal for my generation, for my age, for my friend group, for my family, right? And yet it was something that I was really strongly committed to. And I was committed to this boy, to this person who, fortunately for me, we've now been married for over 20 years and we have 3 children. But at the time, there was no guarantee that this was what I thought it was. We were still, honestly, in that early honeymoon phase. Now, yeah, we got engaged on our second date. So we were engaged and we were moving towards a planning of a wedding. But I knew that I was going to show pregnant at my wedding. I was going to be pregnant when my husband to be was going to meet his in-laws, his family. And I was nervous about all of that, not just because I was raised in an Irish Catholic family. There was plenty of my cousins and my siblings who had had a baby out of wedlock, not just pre-wedlock. So there wasn't that social stigma from the family. It was all an internal stigma. It was a disappointment that I didn't stick to my resolve. Now, Peter was very gentle and kind and encouraging and supportive, and so was both my nurse and my doctor at that time, in the sense that being in the doctor's office is already a bit anxiety provoking for me. You know, we're getting internal exams, we're getting checkups, we're getting measured, we're getting evaluated. And then to layer on top of that, this news that now I'm going to have to make a phone call to tell my beloved, my intended, that we're expecting a child, and that child will arrive about 6 months after we're married. Now, fortunately, not only did Peter received that news with such grace and honor and integrity and gentleness, we loved that baby from the very, very beginning. Even at the birth, I can remember that sense of fear of, will I love this child? And yet everything about the journey and the care and the concessions that we made and how we were living and where we were living and the wedding and the planning and the sharing of this anticipated birth helped cultivate not just the expectation of love, but the genuine love for this coming child. Now, fast forward a bit, and we have a second child. And this second child was scheduled to a T. I had a short window in my schedule. I was in doctoral school, and we decided, mainly me, influenced Peter, that no one should have to be an only child of me and Peter. We're a bit intense. So I felt like my first child deserved to have a partner who they could go to, oh my God, mom is so crazy, mom's so intense, because I knew that that was real. So the truth is we got pregnant right away, in which case the window was met and our second child came while I was in doctoral school. She attended classes with me. I mean, literally both in pregnancy and in nursing, and then all of that. But the third child, he was not expected. We had decided that we were done. We were complete. We were finished. And in fact, we were actually just waiting for a transition in the coverage on our health insurance program for Peter to get a vasectomy. And we missed it about 22 days, in which case we got pregnant. But I was in the middle of working on a really big professional achievement, a professional goal, in which case I wasn't, honestly, 2 little kids and working on this professional goal, I wasn't paying all that close attention to my own cycle. So it was in my 3rd month that I finally took a test and learned that I was pregnant. And I had the wash of fear and panic, much like with the first child. So different than the relief and the, phew, it worked, that I had with the second child, because we were in such a narrow window on what would allow for my travel schedule for school. So coming to terms with the fact that I was pregnant now with number 3, we were really, me personally, I wasn't sure my body was going to bounce back in the way that I wanted it to. I didn't know that I had the energy to toddle after 2 toddlers and have this 3rd child. Now, as the case goes, the eldest was in school by the time the baby was born. So it actually worked out well. I mean, my family is over blessed in the sense that I have 3 amazing, beautiful children. And I have a loving and attentive husband and partner and daddy for them. So all that said, coming to grips with what is real, especially when it doesn't align with what we want, can sometimes be challenging, even if it is what we want later, right? What's here now, I don't want now, I want later. Just really helps us to see our attachments to our way, to our desires, to our expectations, to what we can control. Now, I want to share one more little nuanced story, and this goes way back before Peter entered my life. And I was dating someone who was a very sweet young man. His name is Alec, and we were in high school together, and he professed his love to me in a way that I knew was genuine and heartfelt. And yet I also knew that I didn't have the same intensity of feelings. It wasn't that I didn't care for him. I cared for him deeply. I liked him a lot. I enjoyed spending time with him. I even enjoyed kissing him, right? I was invested in this relationship, and yet it felt out of my own alignment, which is not a phrase that I knew at that time, but it felt insincere to just mimic back the words, I love you, even though the setting was right? Everything about this should have been an even exchange. And yet it wasn't. And so I didn't want to dishonor those words and the power of what those words meant to me and meant to my friend. But how do you not reply, I love you, when someone says, I love you? So fortunately, even at this time, I had done quite a bit of theoretical and philosophical thinking about this scenario, and knew that I wanted to validate not only who this person was to me, and to receive the gift that he was offering me, even though I couldn't return it, even though I couldn't return it in kind. Now, so what did I say, right? What did I do? I said, thank you. I might have even said, thank you, that's so kind of you to say, which now I use to teach folks how to accept a compliment, even if you don't agree with it. But I followed up with, that means so much to me. It means so much to me that you can say those words, that you feel what you feel, and you express that. I'm just not there yet. Just not there yet. Now, the word that he latched onto was the yet. And that really turned our relationship sour and sideways. I don't know if I would have gotten there into a deeper love, a love of partnership versus a love of friendship. But because his motivation changed to prove himself, it really actually caused me to retract even more, in the sense that it wasn't a matter of time any longer. It was a matter of, you can't make me love you. That's not what love is about. To the point where we parted, we separated. I went off to college, and when I came home over the holidays, he came over to the house, and essentially, it wasn't his intention. I know that he was really working the best capacity he had, but he essentially said, you will come home, we will get back together, we will get married. And as an 18-year-old going on, maybe I was 19, that didn't land well for me. It felt like he was trying to own me, to possess me, to control me, which then pushed me even farther down that path of, this won't happen. So if I could rewind, I would like to honor his sharing of affection, but be extra careful about words like yet, or maybe someday, or it could still happen, or what would the future have? Because those kinds of nuances gave Alec a false sense of hope. And it wasn't false by intention, but it provoked him out of, I believe, strong desire and even an edge of fear to push in a way that actually drove me away. And I think that this lesson has been really important, particularly in raising those 3 children, because I try to remember that pushing my love, even on someone who loves me, even on someone who I have the right to love aggressively, doesn't feel like love. It feels like threat. So love in action needs to honor our intention, and it needs to be expressed in a way that can be received. And that's the lesson that I want to take into every day. So take a look at how you're loving, how you're receiving, and how you're giving. May you be well. May you breathe deeply and move freely, labor lovingly, and live vibrantly. May you know authentic love to both receive and to give. Namaste.
Hello there.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm way better than yesterday. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Kudos to you for tackling something that not just is hard, but so challenging on many levels to accept the burden of parenthood, right? The joy, and yet the responsibility is nothing short of hard.
I had my an appointment with my therapist an hour and a half before yoga at 4. And so I did that with William, constantly trying to take the stand and my phone and my earbuds out and all kinds of stuff. So it was like a fun little learning experience, which Travis and I discussed beforehand of, I don't understand how to deal with situations like this. I hope you're okay with me working it out here. And
Yeah.
it was really abiding. But I just suddenly 5:30 it came and Michelle had just called me and said she was just leaving work. And I was like, I didn't know what to do with myself. And I felt so embarrassed having to log in just to say I wasn't going to show up. But
no, I wanted to extend an appreciation, not just because it's good to know, right? In the sense that who's going to be there, who's not, but it also gave an opportunity for the studio, myself and Ashley, to demonstrate that kind of gratitude and appreciation, as well as affirm that our self-care is our first priority. And there isn't a better lesson in practice to demonstrate for a new student than recognizing that there are others who would be here if they could, but circumstances as they are, we've got to honor our self-care. So I honestly wanted to say thank you, even though I was sad that you weren't able to stay for practice, that you made the effort and that you gave such a beautiful example of my intention was this, but this has to take priority. And that's real yoga. That's real living.
thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.